Hi, I'm Daniel Kosoy, and this is United 24 Media. For the first time in 73 days, Russia launched a combined missile and drone attack on Kyiv. The strike on the capital lasted more than 2 hours. Air defense forces destroyed several cruise and ballistic missiles and up to a dozen enemy drones, stated the city military administration. During the attack, thousands of residents took shelter in metro stations.
It's a kind of horror. We are used to the shahids, of course, if I can say so. They fly every night and the region suffers constantly. When there are rockets, we usually hide in a shelter in a safe place.
I often think about what motivates the people who started this and what they lack in their lives to live in peace.
Air raid sirens sounded across the capital around 6:30 a.m. due to the threat of Shahed drones. At the same time, cruise missiles were also on the course towards the Kyiv region. As the missiles approached, Russian forces simultaneously launched a ballistic missile strike on the city, which concluded with another wave of drones. According to the State Emergency Service, a 48-year-old man sustained head injuries, and a fire broke out in a warehouse in the Bryvary district due to falling debris. Ukrainian Air Forces reported that as of 10 a.m., 2 Kh-101 cruise missiles, 2 Iskander MKN-23 ballistic missiles, and 37 Russian UAVs were downed in 8 Ukrainian regions. In total, 96 aerial threats were detected across the country. Russia attacked Kharkiv twice on November 12th, using a new strike drone, molniya 1, meaning lightning. 3 people were injured in these attacks. Among them was a 70-year-old woman injured in her apartment as one of the UAVs hit an 11-story residential building. The regional war crime prosecutors are collecting evidence at the scene.
Kharkiv was attacked for the first time with a new Russian loitering munition called molniya 1, which is itself something between the regular quadcopter carrying a payload and a Shahed suicide drone. The molniya drone is dirt cheap, made of plywood and plastic, and can fly a distance of 40 kilometers. This is clear evidence that Russia cannot gain operational success on the battlefield, resorting to terrorizing the civilian population of Ukraine using a simple yet devastating strike drone tactic.
Indeed, the so-called lightning drone developed in Moscow weighs less than 10 kilograms and can carry a payload of up to 5 kilograms of TNT and can fly a distance upwards of 40 kilometers at 80 kilometers per hour. However, the cheap materials make it a vulnerable target for Ukrainian FPVs. To follow the latest news from Ukraine, subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a comment down below. Ukraine has developed its own reconnaissance drone, announced the Ministry of Strategic Industries on November 11th. The ministry head posted footage of a test launch, stating that the specifications of the in-house development are comparable to the widespread DJI Mavic quadricopter manufactured in China. 8 Ukrainian developers, along with operators from 6 teams of the General Staff HQ and Unmanned Systems Forces, showcased a test flight reaching a distance of 10 kilometers. North Korean troops' involvement on the battlefield will receive a firm response, stated U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken during his visit to Brussels. There, he met with NATO Secretary-General Rutte to discuss the ongoing support for Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. Blinken stated that the Biden administration would bolster its support for Ukraine in the next few months and would try to strengthen the alliance in that time.
As we're working to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to effectively defend itself, the United States continues to step up. We've obligated just recently and pushed out the door another $8 billion in security assistance for Ukraine. That was in September. Another almost $500 million just a few weeks ago. And President Biden is committed to making sure that every dollar we have at our disposal will be pushed out the door between now and January 20th.
While in Brussels, the U.S. Secretary of State also met with the Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha, to discuss the situation in Ukraine and, in particular, the strengthening of its defense.
Ukraine's defense cannot be put on hold and wait. Every day, Russia is bombing our critical infrastructure, energy, ports, hospitals, and schools. Appeasement will not work. Strength will work.
Over $9 billion is still available for providing Ukraine with military aid, stated the Pentagon press secretary Pat Ryder. This includes $7.1 billion, which were allocated under the Presidential Drawdown Authority, PDA. Ryder underlined that the US will use the funds that they have to ensure that Ukraine gets what it needs in order to deter and fight against Russian aggression.
Between the passage of the supplemental and the middle of last month, we've delivered to Ukraine 83% of the critical munitions that we've committed from stock, including 155mm artillery rounds, Gimlers, Patriot, NASAMS missiles, and more. We've also delivered 67% of other critical air defense commitments, including Stingers and Hawk missiles. And we've delivered 60% of the fires capabilities we have committed, including small diameter bombs and 105mm ammunition.
NATO Secretary-General Rutte has called for intensified support for Ukraine. In his first official visit to Paris on November 12th, Rutte met with French President Emmanuel Macron to discuss the security of the alliance. In a joint press briefing, Rutte brought attention to the danger that Russia's alliances with North Korea, Iran, and China pose to Europe and global security as a whole.
Every day, Ukrainians are killed and wounded by the deadly Shahed drones, designed and supplied by Iran. With the money gained from arms sales to Russia, Iran and its proxies destabilize the Middle East and fund terrorism further afield. At the same time, China backs Russia's economy, enables its defense industry, and amplifies its narrative on the world stage. Russia, working together with North Korea, Iran, and China, is not only threatening Europe, it threatens peace and security, yes, here in Europe, but also in the Indo-Pacific and in North America. So we must stand together.
Rutte urged the West to do more than simply keep Ukraine in the fight and maintain the status quo, but enable it to change the course of the war. He maintained that Moscow and its authoritarian allies must be made to feel the cost of the war. More than 50,000 Ukrainians are missing since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. This was stated by the Ministry of Internal Affairs spokesperson during a national telethon on November 12th. According to him, this includes military personnel, civilians, and children. The ministry has been coordinating with regional authorities on the matter since Moscow launched its war of aggression in 2022. The Russian self-proclaimed administration on Ukraine's temporarily occupied territories continue to brainwash the population, take children to military camps for indoctrination, and spew propaganda wherever they can. This was addressed by the Ukrainian Human Rights Ombudsman Dmitry Lubinets in Brussels during a European Parliament hearing on November 12th. He says that almost 60,000 Ukrainian citizens went missing under special circumstances and are unlawfully deprived of their personal liberty. Among them, almost 2,000 missing children, with more than 19,000 being deported to the Russian Federation and/or forcibly transferred to temporarily occupied territories. Meanwhile, only 1,002 children have been returned to their families, added Lubinets. Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov will be replacing self-proclaimed President Putin as head of the Russian delegation at this year's G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro on November 18th and 19th. This was announced by the news agency TASS on November 12th, citing the Russian ambassador to the G20. During a meeting with journalists from the BRICS countries on October 18th, Putin stated that he would not be attending the summit in order to not disrupt his normal course of work. The International Criminal Court issued a warrant for Putin's arrest in March 2023 for the war crime of unlawful deportation of children from occupied Ukrainian territories to Russia. This means that Brazil, a party to the ICC's Rome Statute, would be required to detain him upon entry to the country. Lavrov represented Putin at last year's G20 summit in India, as well as at the UN General Assembly. Ukrainian Guardsmen repelled an all-out Russian assault in the Siversk direction. On November 13th, the National Guard posted footage on Telegram of the 4th Rapid Reaction Brigade, specifically the 3rd Svoboda Battalion, fighting back against the Russian onslaught near the city of Siversk. in the war-torn Donetsk region. Although the Moscow troops utilized wave after wave of armored vehicles, tanks, and personnel, the Ukrainian Guardsmen stood their ground without giving up an inch of their positions, and stopped the assault in its tracks. That's it for today. We're United 24 Media. Thank you for being with us, and see you tomorrow.